Hello and welcome to our webinar. My name is Stephen Antonio and I'm the Director of Family Engagement. I thank you for joining us tonight if you're here with us live or you're watching us in the future. So I'm excited. This is great. This is one of our first webinars we're doing, especially as we are focusing on mental health. And so this webinar is brought to you by Mary Queen of the Apostles Parish, and especially the 2030, which is the young adult group. I have two amazing experts in mental health, and I'm so excited to introduce you to them. So let's get our first one on the board. Here is Christine Williams. Hello, Christine.
Hello.
Dr. Christine, yes. And Christine is a licensed psychiatrist, is that correct?
Psychologist.
Psychologist.
Close enough.
That's not going to be the first time I mess up some words there. And you had to focus on men's mental health, is that correct?
Yeah, in grad school, I focused on vocational career development and the psychology of men and masculinity.
Excellent. Now, in your bio, which is on our Facebook event, you can go look at it. You said that all type of sci-fi is like good. So what is your go-to sci-fi?
That might be Battlestar Galactica.
Now, old or new?
That is an amazing question. I would say new.
Okay.
I would say new.
Well, Battlestar beats Bears. So here we go. And then now I'll introduce our next one, and I apologize ahead of time for her last name, pronouncing it, is Lucianne Callado?
Yep.
Ish?
Mostly.
Good.
And you are a licensed independent social worker and with a focus on families, is that correct?
Yeah. Although I am focusing on just individual therapy, I started off focusing with children, youth, and families.
Excellent. Oh, that's so great. And you mentioned that in your bio, of course, you can see it on our Facebook event, is that your pizza, you consider pizza to be a huge food group, which I agree for 100%. What is your dream topping on said pizza?
Oh boy, I always get stumped on this question. I feel like I am a believer pineapple does belong on a pizza, so I love a good Hawaiian.
Okay.
But my absolute favorite is just like a regular like Neapolitan with like slices of tomato and mozz, a really good bread, a really good crust. Like that's like key.
That is awesome. That was my follow-up question. Do you believe in pineapple being on pizza? And you answered that.
I do.
Yeah. It's okay. It's all right. I'm not a big fan of warm fruit, but that's.
Do you like apple pie?
I don't. No.
Oh, okay. Because I'll bring that up in an argument. Like if you eat apple pie, you can eat pineapple on a pizza. It's a warm.
Oh, okay. So you're already prepared. You're prepared for your belief in warm fruit on said pizza. Well, let's take our time. Thank you both for joining us, joining this webinar. It's been so exciting and so much fun to meet with you throughout the month and kind of plan the night. And for those who are watching, if you, it's just going to be an interview with these two great experts. If you have any questions about mental health, especially the focus of tonight, which is self-care and isolation, preparing for winter in the time of COVID, you can make a comment on the Facebook Live, and we'll have time in the night at the end to hopefully to answer some of your questions. So please do that if you have any questions that come up. All right, let's just dive right into it. Just tell me about your professional experiences a little bit more. We know we touched the base a little bit, but I want to dive a little bit more into it.
I can go. So yes, I am a licensed psychologist, and you mentioned something really great. You know, there's psychiatrists and psychologists, and the words are pretty close. And psychiatrists are the ones that do medications, and psychologists. So my focus, and same with Lucianne, is we really focus on talk therapy and change through those kind of means, which I think is great, especially talking to a crowd like this. I've worked primarily with college age individuals for all of my professional career since I've been licensed and most of my training before that. But I've also expanded into doing consulting for a number of different things, as well as my own private practice. And so while back in the day, I kind of had that research focus on men and masculinity and stuff, it's kind of come full circle. And I just love doing like the one-on-one therapy thing and stuff like this.
Oh, that's so great to hear. Lucianne, what about yourself?
Yeah, like I mentioned, I started my career in home services, in home family therapy. I worked at an agency that provided in-home therapy for at-risk youth. So not only supporting them, but them and their family in real time in their home. Um, I learned so much so quickly. It was a very intense position. But after that, I transitioned for a little bit as a school social worker. Figured out I'm not made for school social work. I do commend those, but I really fell in love with the one-on-one therapy that like as a school social worker, you do a lot, especially with IEPs and supporting families through like that system. But I really enjoyed the one-on-one work. So I opened up my own private practice. While doing that, I also gained some supervisory experience somewhere else. And now I'm doing therapy full time, half with my practice, half at Salem State. I purposely chose my office to be located in Lawrence, Massachusetts. It's a high Latinx population. It's where I grew up. I was born and raised in Lawrence, born in Lawrence General. My first home was on Lawrence Street. I graduated Lawrence High. You really couldn't get any more Lawrence than me.
Yeah. Do you have
Yeah.
a tattoo that's like with the zip code or no?
I should, but it has 3 zip codes for like a 6 square mile
That's
city.
amazing.
But I purposely chose that because like working in agencies, I just saw like the need of like someone like me, like someone who is bilingual, Latinx, and identifies as Latinx, like in the community, servicing the community. So that's my focus.
That's amazing. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Thank you both again, especially now because I know that COVID has just kind of flipped the switch on everything. All of our normal lives, what we can do, what we cannot do. So how has COVID been impacted to the people that you work with?
That is a great question. Do you want to take that one, start there, or me? It's almost too big of a question to answer.
So some of my clients and me are on fire sometimes. And I have other clients doing really well working from home or in a slower paced society, I guess. But I think overall, like, anxiety has gone through the roof. A lot of past traumas are like resurfacing with some triggers, significant health disparities, access to health. I've seen that. I've had a lot of clients be personally affected by COVID. My family has been affected by COVID. How we work, how we function, how we chat, how we socialize. I mean, I'm in this very bare room, although my mess is like tucked away in a corner. There's like a lot of boxes.
Right behind that curtain.
Months, but yeah, that loss of like face-to-face and platonic affection has also been missed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think you make a really great point there. Like, it's the people that we're working with, but yeah, it's even us. Like, there is a piece of me that is loving, kind of being able to be at home more. I'm kind of a classic introvert and I don't mind. I love tech, and so that's great. But I think, there is this feeling of isolation. I think a lot of the people that I work with are feeling really isolated. Dating feels really weird and almost kind of impossible with some of the people that I'm working with. And I think a lot have also lost their jobs. So there's this kind of foreboding sense of what's going on and a real sense of, things like the service industry have really been hurt. Things like teaching have really been kind of upended. And so, like Lucianne was saying, there's this great sense of anxiety kind of through everybody. But then also, I think some real depression, some low level mourning or grief too. And I'm hesitant to call it, psychopathology, because I think it's just the real emotions that we're going through. And kind of collectively, there's a bit of trauma going on right now. So I think we see that a lot.
And how does being with all that, with being the heightened stress and heightened anxiety, how being isolated, how can that impact them able to cope with it?
I mean, I think what I was just having this conversation with somebody today, like there's different kinds of coping strategies that we tend to use. Like we can do things that are nice for ourselves, we can try to think differently, and we can reach out to other people. And I think so many of us really rely on that third one, that sense of social connection to, kind of relieve our anxiety, get through hard times, just even to get a hug. And when you have that moved in such a way that the way you're used to doing it either isn't available at all or it's really, really different, I think that's one of the ways that I'm seeing coping really being impacted.
And what about you, Lucy? Are you seeing it? How are you seeing it being isolated impacting with people who cope with anxiety?
Yeah, similar to what Christine said, a lot of my clients are not having access to a lot of their peer group, their friend group. I think over the summer they were able to social distance, like having their own like 6 feet apart picnics. Everyone brings their own picnic, their blanket. But as the weather gets cooler, I did have a group of clients who started like running, going for a walk, just being outside. And as the temperature drops, that I just see like that, like also affecting my clients. I think about a month ago, I started just brainstorming, all right, how do we prepare for the winter? Like it's no longer just seasonal affect, right? Like you now can't go to probably restaurants or you can't go to the movies like you used to. I think a lot of my clients really depended on just like not being home because some of their biggest stressors were at home. Whether it's that they live with too many people or they live alone, they live in a crowded area, or they live very far from things. It's just getting a lot more difficult.
Yeah, I think, yeah, I was just looking at my life, just being able to, we have an outdoor patio and we counted how many squares it would make 6 feet. And so we did have a lot of gatherings out there, but everyone was always 6 feet of thing. And now it's getting cold and it has to stop. You can't be freezing and hanging out there. And so as we prepare, so as we are shifting in seasons, what kind of strategies would you recommend for people right now who are either dreading winter?
That's a great question.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing that I'm talking with so many people about right now, because there's a sense of being overwhelmed, there's a sense of not having the energy to do a lot of things, and I think that's something that could continue, is to really not overcomplicate it. Like, are you getting up in the morning and eating something that you enjoy? Are you having a cup of coffee or a cup of tea or a smoothie and starting your day out kind of in this space where you can nourish yourself and hydrate yourself and do what you need to do? Are you taking a shower? Like, it doesn't sound like much, but it's some of the most basic self-care that if we think of like what a little kid needs, we're just big little kids. And, kind of starting with that basic coping, especially if we're feeling overwhelmed, I think is something that can be super important.
Same, all of that. Yeah. Also, I would also throw in there, prepare your pods, right? Like having some like form, there will always be some risk as like when you socialize, but like, do you connect with just a couple of people and say like, we're going to be really good at, social distancing and testing, and then like we can hang out, like thinking about that, thinking long-term. Online classes, online dance classes.
Mm-hmm. I think it's huge thinking about, Lucia, what you're saying with Thanksgiving coming up. It's going to be really different. And I think it could have the opportunity to bring up a lot of sadness for what we're not getting to do. But I think that's a great thought to be thinking of, like, okay, who am I going to be with and how am I going to do that safely? So to not, kind of spike your anxiety or put yourself in physical danger because you're not looking at precautions, but to do it in a way that you're going to be able to get, some of your socializing needs met and maybe come up with something new in terms of a tradition or a different way of doing things that's going to make you feel good in the next couple weeks.
Yeah, I think I definitely like routine for me during March and April were really really important. I had to actually got to a point where on my phone I had a daily reminder of breakfast, lunch, dinner, shower, and vitamins, just so that I wouldn't forget it. You know, there was no routine when it was in the beginning, and that really, when I got back into it, it really helped me just to be like, okay, this is kind of normal a little bit. What about some practices to maybe, I don't know what the terminology, but maybe for like mentally preparing yourself, or maybe seeing little good things in your life? What can we all do to help prepare?
I mean, I think the first thing that comes to mind for me that I've been trying to do, and I am not a silver linings person, and I am not a everything's on fire, but I'm going to pretend like things are great. So I'll say that, and then I'll say this. Practicing gratitude for the things that are there. I think it's how the mind works to kind of want to turn towards the things that are going wrong, which is great. Thank you, brain. Like, it's a problem solver. But I think that can also spike our anxiety to focus, and our depression or our grief to focus on the things that we're losing and the things that are difficult. Now, those things are there. 100% those things are there. But can we also kind of, if you picture it as a giant soccer ball, can we kind of turn it and look at the other pieces and the other sides, and what are the things through the day that we can be grateful for? I've lost a lot of routine and the different things that I was able to do before the pandemic, but at the same time, in the evening with my partner, we're having tea every evening, which is something we would have never done. Now he's got his own little teacup, and it's really great, and it's small, and it doesn't necessarily fix anything, but it's something that I can just kind of pause and be grateful for in the day.
That's great. Counting the little things. And any other strategies as we prepare?
Yeah, so on the flip coin, so I've had a group of clients feel fatigued with like the gratitudes. Because that's something like in counseling that we always talk about, like, let's reframe this, let's focus on what's going well. I have a group of clients that like I started noticing that they just felt like they kept saying like, I should be more grateful, or I should feel this way, like the shoulds. And I'm like, ooh, like this is dicey territory. Like, yes, like you're able to continue working. Yes, like you live with a partner, or yes, like you've been able to slow down, but like, yes, like you're tired. Yes, you're getting migraines from all the Zoom. So I would say to those on the flip side of that, I'm having trouble just like acknowledging the not so great parts, like naming it, saying it out loud, and just sitting with that feeling, and it will pass. I always say embrace the bad feelings, because sometimes when you don't, they hide, they build up, and then I don't know where they start seeping out in like different spots, like when you're just sitting on the couch watching a movie with your partner and then you just start crying, but it's a comedy. Getting the bad feelings out, like they're normal. I want to normalize sad feelings. But that's what I've seen. I also have the other wave of clients who are like, everything sucks, and I'm like, everything. I mean, you have access to Wi-Fi and counseling, so.
Well, and I think you mentioned something really important in there, which is that like stuff is going to seep up. Like, a lot of counseling isn't about banishing negative emotions, but it's learning how to sit with them and be present, because otherwise you do see them start to leak and start to seep out. And I think, especially for some groups of people who, just expressing emotions very openly isn't exactly their way of being. I think about my research with men and masculinity. I think about different communities of color. It is, again, especially men. You start to get the irritability, you start to get headaches, you start to get muscle aches, you start to get high blood pressure. And so also for people to be kind of paying attention to that and thinking about, again, how can they care for their bodies? How can they give themselves space to kind of lean into what they need right then and there, and recognizing that those can also be signs of distress or not necessarily mental health symptoms, because again, I don't want to pathologize what's really a normal reaction to a very big world kind of tragic event.
Right. I think Broad City had a great episode. They have many great episodes, but they had a great episode of Alana getting a winter light. So she would just stand in front of the light, and they made a great case for seasonal depression. But there are things out there like Disney Plus and Netflix, and maybe having a drink in the evening, or even shopping online. We all know about shopping therapy. What do you think about that? Are these good? Are they bad?
It depends. It honestly, what's an example? I was just talking to like two clients on two separate occasions. They're trying to cut down on substance use, and they're saying, oh, like, but I'm okay with drinking, but I want to use substances when I'm with my friends. I'm like, but if you know your body's not okay with it, it's okay to stick to your glass of wine if you know you're going to be okay doing that. With online shopping, some people can handle it and others cannot. So I would say not everything is bad for you. Every person is just very different. Your brain chemistry is very different. You cope very differently. Your lived experiences are very different. So whatever your relationship is with whatever makes you feel good, also processing, like, is it a healthy relationship? Is it a good relationship?
When I'm working with people, I love kind of putting, kind of the question out there, and it's hard to be honest. I know it's very hard to be honest with myself and with food, and especially with sweets, but are you in control of your use, or is it in control of you? And kind of using that as a bar of thinking about, okay, do I need to look at a different way of coping or do something a little bit differently? Like Lucianne said, your relationship with that thing, I think a lot of times is what kind of makes you need to think about it or reconsider it a little more. And again, not trying to feel guilty or not trying to shame yourself into some hole about it, but just being honest about like, you know what, I think I need to check this week a little bit, and seeing if you can, and if not on your own, then seeing like what are the other resources out there, groups and counseling and stuff. But I think that could be a real struggle through, kind of this winter.
So just like a good diet, it's all moderation. Just like and I think it's also really great that you both are speaking about kind of internally. You want to kind of reflect internally and see. It seems like where you know your limits, kind of where that is, and it seems like it just seems like 2020 just keeps on getting harder and harder and harder. Is it possible that part of the struggles that people are dealing with are just unavoidable? I know that for me, at points, I like to just avoid, but how do we deal with the unavoidable?
I think a conversation, both Lucianne and I work with college students, and so we're running up against like a really real, tangible kind of finish line at the end of the semester. And whether it's academic work or job or parenting, I do think we're all going to see that our limitations are a little bit different, and we're going to hit a wall sooner than we would have in the past. Or maybe we're the kind of person who has never sort of tested their limits and hit a wall and not been able to achieve something. But I think that's going to be the reality for us now. And, I kind of have to sit with myself because I am total perfectionist, and prepping for this, I was like, oh my goodness, what are all the questions he could ask? Exactly what can I say? We're not going to be able to do things perfectly in a pandemic, and learning to be compassionate to ourselves when we have these very real human limitations come up, I think is just huge.
Yeah, I think it's about sitting with failure sometimes, and what does that mean? And is failing a class, like, how bad is it? I started using the term like, let's be a pandemic okay. Like, this might be a regular year bad, but this is a pandemic okay. And scaling, right? Like, what are we scaling this on? A lot of our students feel like this is surmounting stress as a term ends, as the semester ends. Like, they're just like afraid to fail, and overwhelmed with all of the assignments. I had one client say like she stopped baking, and I'm like, but baking makes you happy. And like, can you bake? And like, well, something's in the oven, like finish a reflection paper. And then she was like, yes, like I could totally do that. So I think just remembering to access your coping skills and just weighing out like, yes, like, will you not get a good grade for not doing this one thing, but have you reached your limit for the week and it's only Wednesday and you're already feeling burnt out? I would just like honestly listen to your body, learn to fail, talk to friends on the phone or socially distance or with a therapist, like learning how to be okay with not being perfect.
Yeah, and something you said in there really spoke to me as I'm thinking about, kind of not getting judgmental towards ourselves about these different things. Something that I see as I'm talking to different clients or different people, or even reflecting in myself, like some of the symptoms of whether we call it stress or depression or anxiety or trauma are real kind of impacts to our motivation, to our concentration, to our attention. I really, again, feel for people who are in school or who are working or trying to do like high level front brain kind of stuff, because those are the parts of the brain right now that are going offline as we're just sort of surviving through this and adapting. And, like Lucia, I love that. Like, what is my bar for right now for myself, and kind of being okay with that. But I know a lot of people do look around and they're like, but this person is baking bread and they just put up their, fourth, like whatever on Instagram. I'm like, well, we're all trying to look like we're holding it together. But I think if we're collectively honest with ourselves, like right now it's just hard.
Yeah, it is. It is. And especially if we think of the future, which is, cold, low light night days. And at least in April or March and April, we had the summer to think about, oh, we can get to the beach and, oh, we can do that. And now we have to think of the cold days. And so is there, do we have to kind of have an acceptance of what is happening first before we do any self examination of ourselves?
Somebody recently said that happiness is, I think it was reality minus expectations. It's very easy to want to look for the silver linings, or it's very easy to want to, kind of say like, oh, maybe this will be okay, or kind of try to paint things in a good light. But what we actually know from a mental health perspective is if we lean and radically into an acceptance of what's going on, it's actually better for us, and so that radical acceptance, it doesn't mean that we have to like what's going on. It doesn't mean we have to approve of what's going on. We even use this with people in situations where they're being mistreated. But what we teach is, okay, this is what's going on. So if we start from there and kind of, and especially in this time where it's, a pandemic torturing us, forgiving reality for being what it is, and then just dropping the struggle to try and change it, because so much energy can go into trying to change something that's not changeable, and there's probably better ways to spend that.
Any comment?
I think that was a great point, just starting like with the bar of like, this is where things are at. How do we scaffold? Is it every Sunday you're baking sourdough bread? That's one thing. It's a good bread for you. It has a ton of bacteria that's good for gut health. Like, or does it mean like every Saturday you go through one of the Avengers movies? I think 23 of them. And they're really well crafted and always snubbed for the Oscar every year because it's an action film.
True.
The score, the plot line, I can go on for another 2 hours about it.
Don't get her started on pizza, fruit on pizza, or Marvel. I love it. What you were saying?
Yeah, I mean that too. Also having pizza. My first 2 weeks of the pandemic, in 14 days, I ate 10 pizzas with my partner. We had a friend living with us at the same time. So quite a bit. But scaffolding from where you're at. And sometimes like a day is not going to be so great, but it doesn't mean that every day following is going to be bad as well. I think it's just taking one day at a time, as cheesy as that line is. It's so needed right now. Everyone's lives are very different. So I think you brought up social media and looking at each other's lives. Like someone making a ton of bread, they might not have a job. They might be at home. They might be doing something else. Like social media is whatever picture you want to paint it, right? Take it with a grain of salt and just, sometimes put the phone down and pick up your remote to your Fire Stick and watch Netflix. Escape sometimes, but yeah, I love that. Start from where you're at.
Mhm. That's great. Thank you so much. It's just been really great to talk to you, hear from you too. Do you see anything different with, because I know that we're targeting more of the 20 and 30s year olds who are either not, they're home because their college didn't allow them to return or they had to come back. What do you see for them? What are some ways that they can live this new kind of normal for that generation, and also a little bit older, those who are, in their 30s as well?
I think the thing that I've been trying to talk about with a lot of people is to, because this is, and I hate this phrase, hate it, because this is the new normal and we don't know how long this is going to be or if this is reflecting kind of some permanent changes, is take a sense of adventure to it. Like there's a lot of loss, there's a lot of real grief, especially if you just went through your senior year of high school or your senior year of college, or you were supposed to be getting married or having your first baby. Like there were some real things, sometimes you missed out on that you might not be getting back or that looked really different than your ideal. But if you kind of look at this with a sense of adventure and kind of lean into, okay, how am I going to survive this time? What am I going to do with this time? It's going to make sort of some really interesting stories in 60 years from now for those of us who will end up with grandchildren. And I think that sense of adventure is, again, I feel like I'm sounding a little cheesy there, but I think there's a lot that we could do with this time that could be really interesting and really new. And I like that.
We're kind of getting, I don't know if this is going to trigger anyone, but we're kind of getting at like a second chance, because if you were like me, the first time during COVID and the shutdowns, I did nothing. It was basically, I ate and I watched TV, and that is all I did. And knowing that hopefully in this state that we're not going into a full shutdown, but less outdoor activities will be possible due to the weather, that I hope for myself to kind of do things I saw people doing in the spring and want to do more. Oh, I can see that. Oh, I can probably work out a little bit, or maybe eat less or eat healthier. That now that I have this time, I might have this time now that I don't have all those distractions of going out and hanging out with my friends in a normal way, that I can really focus on it. But also add in times with my friends differently. So Facebook time, or watch a movie together virtually and all that stuff. I do see the winter for myself to be more of a second chance to do things I wasn't prepared to do mentally the first time around.
Mm-hmm.
We do have some people who are watching who are a little bit older than 20s and 30s. Mm-hmm. Do you see their experiences with the younger generation different? Is it similar?
I feel like a lot of the people I am talking to who, I'm Gen X myself, or a little bit older, or up into, my parents' generation, I think there is a greater sense of, kind of leaning into this and recognizing like that we've gone through a lot, that it can be okay. But on the other hand too, I do think, especially as we get into, the upper end of the 60s and 70s and 80s, there also is a different tone to things where there can be some real anxiety related to health issues. And also, I think, something that we have just as a society in general, is that a lot of our elders aren't necessarily living with their families or in super close contact. And so there can also be a lot of isolation on that end. And whereas, somebody who is 20 or 30 and more digitally native, we may need to, really kind of take a look at, okay, is everything accessible that we're doing to people on, that end of the age spectrum? Even when we were talking about, how to do this talk, we were kind of talking about like, okay, how do we make this easiest and like a click of a button? But recognizing that in our own families or in our own communities, we've got more vulnerable people that we're going to be, maybe needing to reach out to or helping kind of get into these sort of formats.
That was great.
And
Yeah, I'm seeing the anxieties as well. I'm having talks with some clients that do live with their grandparents, and I think there's just like that fear of getting them sick. Their grandparents are also like feeling that anxiety of just like not being able to go out, sometimes not being able to have contact with their kids or their grandchildren. I know like it's been a long time since I've given my grandmother a hug, and during the nicer weather, like I would hang out on the porch while she would hang out inside, and we would FaceTime. And even then, like we're both crying because we still can't like just hug. But I think finding ways of still connecting and keeping that generation safe, because I think health is a major concern. I know personally, like not being near my grandmother is huge. She is older, and I would, even if I had just gone to Market Basket in the last 2 weeks, I would never want to put her at risk. And then that also brings anxiety. But I also see with some of my clients that come in conversation, like their grandparents feeling depressed, that they're not able to access some of these other social supports that they did have. So that's also hard, and something we should also be aware of is not just their physical health, but their mental health as well.
Yeah, I think at least in my experience, an older generation doesn't tap into mental health, I think, as much as the younger generation. Is that true?
I think it definitely is. I think it's a big issue. And I think it ranges from, people just not having experience or exposure to, other people that have some real and some very appropriate biases, against therapists, and especially, some of the things that therapy used to be, or not feeling like it exactly fits with their culture or, maybe their religion. And I think, what I would say is give it a try. One of the things that has come across time, in our fields of social work and psychology and, mental health counseling, is to really kind of let go of what we think therapy should be as therapists and try and meet the people that we're working with where they're at with what they need and how they might like to do therapy. So it's this, broader culturally responsive model of how to do this work, kind of taking a look at that. And so people, I think, might be pleasantly surprised if they had, if they did try therapy maybe 20 or 30 years ago and hated it, might feel a little bit different now. Or if they've never tried it, they might just be pleasantly surprised about what it's really like. Like, I don't like analyzing people or making them feel judged. It's not my goal. And so it might actually feel really nice and really holding.
That's great. Yeah, kind of reaching out to those generations that might not be too comfortable with it, no matter what their reasons. For those who are watching on our Facebook, we have our comments open. If you have any questions, you can type it. We have our first question tonight is what do you guys suggest for people who are working at home and that balance between work life and life when it's at the same place?
That is both of us.
Welcome to my spare bedroom that has a mess tucked away. Something I've suggested, find a space where you can call this like work. And depending on your living situation, it's going to look different. Does it look like you're in a spare room? Does it look like you're in the kitchen? Or does it look like you're on the couch? And I would say, like, if it's on the couch, have one side of the couch where you do your work and the other side of the couch where you just relax. If it's, at the kitchen table, make sure you change where your seating is. Like when you do eat, I know my partner, he works in the dining room table because I have to work up here. When we eat in the dining table, because sometimes it's on our lap in the living room, he will sit at a different place in the dining room, and that kind of creates that boundary. And even then, he hates eating in the dining room because it's his office. But having that routine, taking your lunch break, I cannot stress enough taking food breaks. I started just taking breaks at noon every day at 12 o'clock. I am eating, my partner and I, we sit or we cook together or we go somewhere and grab something to eat. And I've never felt such a balance than forcing myself to have that hour break. We have breakfast in the morning, lunch at noon, and then we figure out dinner. But oh my gosh, who would have thought eating and taking a break would make such a difference? I think there have been studies that show when you work from home, you actually work a lot harder and a lot longer. And I would say really be clear about your boundaries, know when to stop, know when to shut your laptop off, because if not, it'll never end.
It's funny you mentioned the laptop, because I think, there's two things that come to mind for me. And one is to have a very clear ending routine whenever the end of the day is, and maybe you're in a 9 to 5 and that actually is 5 o'clock, or maybe you're on a really weird off schedule shift, or you're working late, or you're helping the kids with homework and keeping them alive through the day and doing your work up till midnight. But having that shutdown routine, at the end of the day, I very intentionally, and I do it intentionally now, but it started very subconscious. I stand up, I shut my laptop, and we're done. And that's it. And I don't go back to it for anything. If I want to look at something, I look at it on my phone. So I kind of have a closing routine. I also really liked, Lucianne, what you said about moving from space to space. And I think for people who are working during the day out of the room that they sleep in, this is something that they may want to think about, and like Lucianne said, it may be that you have to work in there, but just trying to change the orientation of things or move, some tech out, because what we know in terms of sleep hygiene is that really the best thing to do is to keep the place of sleep and for sex and for nothing else, so that kind of those memories, those feelings, all that affect of work doesn't end up lumping in there. And so for some people, they don't have the space and that's not possible, but trying to do something intentional to move it is ideal. And if there is any other option, the bedroom in which you sleep is really the worst place to have your home office. So if you can.
That's great. Yeah. I think I think that's a great point too, just because my roommate in the beginning he turned the dining room table into his office, and I was now part of his work all the time. And it was really tough to separate, but I know that one question that came through is, so the winter is coming, and how do we stay healthy? There's probably not be able to go to the gym, even harder without going to the gym. So what do you suggest for staying healthy during this winter?
Do you want to go for it, or I'll?
You start.
Okay. So I've been hearing a lot about people's relationships with food and their concern with their relationship with food and their relationship with their bodies. I'll always suggest, go get a physical, make an appointment with your doctor, make sure everything is okay. And if it's not, follow up with whatever specialist they give you or refer you to, like a nutritionist, a dietitian. But I think this could be a time where you can have fun with your food, especially if you're going to be at home making your own food, changing your relationship with your food, being involved with your food. I think I've never eaten more vegetables than I do now. I signed up for a community service, it's a CSA, I pick up vegetables every Wednesday. I paid a flat rate, get it direct from the farm to my table. Sometimes it doesn't get put away right away, but if you have access, maybe doing something like that, maybe creating a routine where you're just eating more frequently throughout the day, and taking in healthier options. And it's not about eliminating the bad stuff, but maybe introducing more good stuff.
Mm-hmm. And I think depending upon, where you were before, the pandemic started, if you are a fitness buff and the gym was your thing, like there's such a social aspect to that I feel like is kind of hard to recreate. Like there was a relaxation aspect of it for me when I used to go. But the online class thing is there, the different things you can do in your home and kind of, maybe it's worth the investment, pick some weights up off of Facebook Marketplace to kind of do. But I also think something that I would say with that is being really realistic and looking at what that motivation for, fitness or good diet is. Good diet helps us feel better mentally and physically. Exercise helps us feel better mentally and physically. But back to that self-compassion, our bodies are helping keep us alive in the middle of a pandemic. And so not judging our bodies very harshly and not beating ourselves up if our genes aren't quite fitting the way that they used to, or conversely, if we find it really hard to eat because we're stressed out. So I think there is that, there's a lot of different things we can do, but also just checking on how much we want to do and should do and doing what we can and then not beating ourselves up.
That's great. Thank you so much. Great answer. We have some few more questions. Any advice on how to speak or to address a supervisor who keeps pushing productivity in a pandemic?
That's a great question. I feel very fortunate because, the situations where I'm in, I feel like collaboratively we have had those conversations. And so I think it's something where I have people who are not quite in those situations. It's a fine balance, kind of determining if you have kind of the power and the voice to talk with your supervisor about something along the lines of, hey, like, what is our goal? What do we have to get done? What is mission critical? And potentially being really honest and vulnerable, which again, for different people can have different levels of risk. Again, if you work for somebody that really cracks the whip and is not particularly kind versus somebody who maybe just doesn't realize, you may need to be vulnerable about like, hey, look, this is how this is impacting me. Because maybe it is that they just can't read your mind and they don't know and they're doing okay. Or maybe everybody is trying to kind of put on an act and pretend like everything's all right and it just kind of needs called out. But in other situations, I want to acknowledge that it can be harder and you may have a boss that doesn't receive it really well and it may be hard to change a job and you might need to kind of look at what you can do for yourself and what you can control.
I would say utilize your PTO days, sick time, mental health days. If you just can't afford the risk, right? Like as Christine, as you were saying, like taking a look at your risk, you just can't do it, like quit your job, or depending on your relationship with your supervisor, really just talking about then taking time off, whether it be just a couple of days off. Do you have vacation time that's going to expire pretty soon? Trying to find that balance and just talking to a friend or a family member just about what that can look like and normalizing taking time off for mental health days, because that will affect your physical health as well.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like you're talking about the whole body too. You're taking care of your health physically, making sure you're eating right, going on walks, exercise. You don't have to, it's a pandemic. You don't have to be the size you were in high school or the size you were in January. But also finding that balance between work and life mentally, but also physically, if you can do that. Or even I know that my friends just have a chair that they only sit in when they're working. So like it's not an extra chair, it's just a chair for them to work in. So that is, thank you so much. These are just great questions and great answers from you two. We have one particular one which I love because I wish I could have more of these. But COVID has left us feeling empty. Are dogs the answer?
Dogs are always the answer. Dogs have never not been the answer.
fuzzy, adorable things. I will also give cats a little bit of a shout out. And I'll tell you the best thing. I mean, yeah, Steven's like, no. I think the best thing about pets, like scientific, there is literature on the fact that pets lower your blood pressure, so yes. But B, I think one of the things that I always talk to the people I work with about is that animals and babies, but animals really do move through the day with the perfect level of chill, and it's because of their breathing. If you watch a dog or a cat, and I think if I were to leave people with one thing to try and help control their anxiety, it would be to take a look at your little pet and watch them breathe, and you'll notice that their little belly goes up and down and up and down. And then if you put a hand on your chest and a hand on your belly, you might notice at least that your chest goes up and down and your belly doesn't move. And we need to learn that from cats and dogs. That's that diaphragmatic breathing. It actually massages the vagus nerve that goes up into your brain, that sets off a relaxation response if you're breathing down into your belly. And that's why your dog and cat, most dogs and cats are pretty chill. Some are on Prozac, but not most.
It's okay.
Yeah.
Who isn't? Well, thank you.
That's mental health help.
Yes, that's right. That is right. So we're heading down to our last a few minutes. I want to thank everyone who's been watching on Facebook Live and those who are watching in the future as well. We will be putting a lot of resources up on our event page too from these two great experts, so you can find out resources of where to get mental health and especially Lucienne, you sent information about people wherever they're coming from, right? If they're Black or they're white or anything. So there's guides out there just for you, which is amazing. Well, the last question, there's a lot of things that people can do. We discussed that, can do and should do despite isolation, but what about making connections when being socially distanced?
Well, I think I'll say two things. One is that I take a tip from my partner and a lot of long-term friends where, it is possible to make really meaningful connections, online and not necessarily face-to-face. But I also think that that is an amazing setup for this other talk that might feature our dear friend Lucienne Collado and somebody else for next week.
That's right. Great segue. Thank you very much. So 2030 presents Making Meaningful Relationships. Does physical distance equal social distance? Almost everyone has experienced big changes in how they work, go to school, socialize, and live. Differences in personality, culture, life situations, and experiences mean that some of us feel deeply disconnected and lonely, while others might be doing okay. Whether you're struggling or thriving, join us to learn about discussing our value, discerning your value related to friendships and family, the different ways of and what it means to be connected and cultivating your social networks. So that conversation happens in the same place, Facebook, next Thursday, November 16th at 7 p.m. You can find the event on our Facebook page. And just one more announcement too, because this is sponsored by 2030 of Mary Queen of the Apostles Parish in Salem. And we are hosting an online series called Alpha in January 2021. Alpha is a place where you can take an honest look at the big questions in life. Have you ever asked yourself, is there more than life than this? I think that is I'm gonna ask that question a lot this year. Then Alpha is for you. At Alpha, you'll meet great people and have a chance to put your thoughts, questions, and doubts on the table without being judged or discouraged. Alpha, where questions create community. You can find out more information at our website, mqoa.org/alpha. Again, thank you so much, Christine and Lucienne, for joining me tonight. This has been a great conversation, a great back and forth. We do have a few more minutes if you guys want to say one final thing for those who are watching online.
Oh, geez, that's so much pressure.
I know.
It's not your final thought.
My only.
I would say I've got one. If you do find yourself having to isolate or quarantine, so if you are one of the people who is in the extra fun level of shutdown where you have to be by yourself with your own room and all of that stuff, either because you have tested positive or because you've had exposure. I've been talking to different people in this situation and realized that all of my time on silent retreats actually has something to do with this, which the way to make it through your day when you're kind of locked in a single room and you don't have a lot of human contact, sleep in as late as you can, make a schedule for everything, even on the half an hour, set up different things that you're going to do through the day. When are you going to eat? What are you going to eat? To read, all of those things, and try to go to bed early. So if you have tested positive and you need to isolate, or if you're in quarantine, I think that's my best recommendation for you. Stock up on the Netflix and all the things you need to get yourself through, and just give yourself a little schedule for the day, because it does gets a little wonky in your brain sometimes when you're alone.
That's great. So build your schedule, make your schedule to stay kind of sane. And Lucianne?
Yeah, I was going to say, and if you're looking for mental health services, a lot of insurances are covering copays and deductibles, and they're waiving those fees. So if you've never really had access to mental health services, or you don't know what it's about, you can look on like psychologytoday.com or other platforms to look for a therapist. You can even filter them, because I know representation matters in the therapy space. So to find a therapist that you might find that fits your needs, calling up your health insurance, just double checking. But as long as we're in a state of emergency, a lot of them are waiving that. So they're expanding access to mental health. So I would say, like, if you are stuck, meet a friendly neighborhood therapist, and let's process some of the things that 2020 has graced us with.
That's great. And that leads us to the end of this conversation. And just to know that if you want to reach out to Christine or Lucianne, their information is on our Facebook event under the discussion, with their websites as well, to reach out to them. Thank you, both of you, for joining me tonight. And we'll see half of you next week, Lucianne. And we'll have another discussion about making relationships. What is that? Making meaningful relationships. And again, thank you very much. Have a great night. Bye-bye.
Thank you, you too. Bye.